What if I told you that some of the most powerful men on Earth, worth hundreds of billions of dollars, could engineer rockets, dominate global media, and reshape industries, yet failed at the one role money cannot automate: fatherhood? In private jets and billion-dollar boardrooms, love became conditional, loyalty became currency. Watch until the end to see which billionaire used inheritance itself as a weapon of control and how that decision permanently shattered his own bloodline. Elon Musk. When a $700 billion empire couldn't save a father-daughter bond, what does it mean to build rockets powerful enough to reach Mars, yet fail to bridge the distance inside your own home? At the height of his wealth cycle, Elon Musk was widely described as a man worth $700 billion, commanding empires through Tesla, SpaceX, and a portfolio of ventures reshaping energy, artificial intelligence, and space exploration. Markets moved when he posted a sentence. Governments negotiated around his infrastructure. Entire industries recalibrated to his timelines. But behind the spectacle of innovation, a quieter fracture was forming, one that no balance sheet could repair. Born in 2004 as Xavier Alexander Musk, his daughter would later transition and legally change her name to Vivian Jenner Wilson, formally removing the Musk surname in 2022. That legal petition was not symbolic, it was surgical. In court documents, she stated she no longer wished to be related to her biological father in any way, shape, or form. In the ecosystem of billionaire families, where surnames are assets and lineage often functions as inheritance branding, such a move carries weight beyond emotion. It is a public severance from a fortune valued in the hundreds of billions. Reports from custody arrangements suggest Musk's physical presence during formative years was limited. By his own admission, his professional intensity dominated his schedule. When present, accounts describe a parenting style shaped by resilience, ideology, toughness, discipline, competitiveness. In a household driven by engineering logic, emotional nuance reportedly struggled to find space. As Vivian began expressing her gender identity, tension escalated. Musk later stated on a podcast, "My son is dead," framing the transition as ideological loss rather than personal evolution. Vivian responded with equal finality, reinforcing the rupture. This conflict did not unfold in obscurity. It played out in a hyper-visible era where Musk's words influenced stock valuations worth tens of billions of dollars. When someone operating companies valued in the hundreds of billions publicly frames a family disagreement in ideological terms, the private becomes geopolitical. The irony is stark. A man investing billions into artificial intelligence and neural interface technology found himself unable to interpret the emotional data within his own family. In ultra-wealth ecosystems, inheritance is often structured through trusts, equity allocations, and voting shares tied to future corporate control. Severing a surname tied to $700 billion is not simply rebellion, it is a refusal of that architecture. It raises uncomfortable questions about legacy. Can generational power survive without generational alignment? Does technological futurism inherently clash with social transformation inside the home? The deeper story is not about politics. It is about scale. When wealth reaches hundreds of billions, identity itself becomes strategic territory. Musk built companies designed to colonize other planets. Yet the most consequential loss may have occurred within a single legal filing in a California courtroom. In the world of extreme capital, success is measured in market caps and launch trajectories. But what happens when emotional distance becomes the only thing that cannot be engineered? Let me know what you think about this paradox. Steve Jobs, the $10 billion visionary who denied his own daughter. He built machines that changed the way billions of people communicate, think, and even fall in love. Yet the most intimate conversation of his life began in denial. When Steve Jobs stood at the helm of Apple, guiding it toward a valuation that would eventually redefine global markets, his personal fortune climbed to approximately $10 billion by the time of his death in 2011. Investors saw precision, engineers saw genius, the public saw a visionary. But behind the curtain of innovation, a far more uncomfortable narrative was unfolding. In 1978, Lisa Brennan Jobs was born to Jobs and his former partner, Chris Ann Brennan. At that moment, Apple was still fragile, not yet the trillion-dollar titan it would become. Instead of embracing fatherhood, Jobs initially denied paternity, claiming infertility and suggesting another man might be responsible. This was not a private hesitation whispered in uncertainty. It escalated into a legal confrontation. A court-ordered DNA test in 1980 confirmed with overwhelming probability that he was indeed Lisa's father. Only under judicial compulsion did child support begin, calculated during a period when Apple's valuation was rapidly climbing and Jobs' equity stake was turning into millions. The contradiction deepened in 1983 when Apple launched the Lisa computer, a groundbreaking personal computer priced near $10,000 at release, an extraordinary sum at the time. Industry observers widely believed the machine was named after his daughter. Jobs publicly denied it. To investors, the denial protected narrative discipline. To Lisa, it reinforced emotional distance. The company that would later generate hundreds of billions in annual revenue bore the silent echo of her name, yet she was left questioning whether it meant anything at all. As Apple matured and Jobs' wealth expanded into the billions, inheritance became another instrument of control. Reports suggest he told Lisa she would receive nothing from him. In ultra-high net worth families, such declarations are not casual remarks. When a patriarch controls assets worth billions, inheritance is leverage. It shapes behavior, loyalty, and perceived value within the family hierarchy. For a daughter growing up adjacent to one of the most powerful CEOs in modern history, the emotional weight of that leverage could not be offset by stock price surges. Late in life, Jobs expressed regret for not spending more time with Lisa. Illness has a way of clarifying priorities that ambition once obscured, but regret operates differently from repair. The billions remained intact. The global brand thrived. The devices he introduced reshaped culture. Yet the human relationship that began in litigation and denial could never fully align with the elegance of his product launches. This is the paradox at the center of extreme wealth. A man who obsessed over seamless user experience struggled with the complexity of unconditional acceptance. $10 billion built a technological empire. It could not engineer intimacy. Rupert Murdoch, billion-dollar empire, billion-dollar rivalry. In dynasties built on information, succession is never a private matter. It is a battlefield disguised as a boardroom. By 2025, Rupert Murdoch stood at the center of a media empire valued in the tens of billions, with a personal fortune estimated around $24.4 billion, anchored in Fox Corp and News Corp. These were not just companies. They were narrative machines capable of shaping elections, influencing public opinion across continents, and determining which stories dominated global discourse. Control of such an empire is not symbolic inheritance, it is geopolitical leverage. For years, the question was not whether Murdoch would step aside, but which son would inherit operational authority over assets collectively valued at more than $20 billion. Lachlan Murdoch and James Murdoch were not merely heirs, they were ideological variables within a corporate equation. Inside the family trust structure, voting power determined not only dividends but direction. In media empires, editorial philosophy affects market performance, regulatory scrutiny, and political alliances. Succession therefore became less about paternal affection and more about strategic alignment. James initially appeared positioned as a future leader, holding executive roles across global divisions. But as ideological divisions sharpened, particularly over editorial direction and governance standards, the fracture widened. In 2020, James resigned from the board, citing disagreements over content and strategic direction. In a corporation where influence can translate into billions of dollars in advertising revenue and market capitalization shifts, such a resignation is not a family argument. It is a signal to investors. Behind closed doors, trust restructuring efforts reportedly sought to consolidate greater control under Lachlan. In ultra-high net worth families, trusts are precision instruments. They allocate voting rights, determine succession triggers, and protect capital from fragmentation. Adjusting them can redirect authority over assets worth tens of billions of dollars. For James, exclusion from this structure represented more than financial displacement. It was removal from the command architecture of a global media system. By 2025, a legal settlement reportedly provided financial compensation, while formal operational influence remained concentrated elsewhere. In raw monetary terms, even a fractional stake in a media empire of this scale equates to billions, but control and cash are not interchangeable. In families where power is measured by voting shares and board appointments, losing governance rights can outweigh monetary gain. What makes this saga compelling is not the number itself, though $24.4 billion commands attention. It is the mechanism. When inheritance becomes conditional upon ideological conformity, loyalty transforms into currency. Within empires that shape public narratives, internal dissent carries amplified consequence. The Murdoch case reveals a deeper principle of trillionaire ecosystems. Succession planning is rarely about affection. It is about continuity of control. And when control over a media apparatus capable of influencing millions is at stake, even family bonds can be recalibrated to protect the architecture of power. Sumner Redstone. From heir apparent to legal enemy. Power becomes most dangerous when it refuses to age. Long after most billionaires retreat into ceremonial roles, Sumner Redstone remained welded to the control panel of an empire worth approximately $2.66 billion at the time of his death in 2020. Through national amusements, he held decisive voting power over Viacom and CBS, two media giants whose combined market influence extended into global broadcasting, film production, and advertising markets valued in the tens of billions. For Redstone, stepping down was never an option. Authority was not a position, it was identity. His daughter, Shari Redstone, had once been positioned as a natural successor. Educated, disciplined, and strategically embedded within the corporate structure, she gradually assumed greater responsibility within national amusements. On paper, succession seemed logical. But in billionaire dynasties, logic rarely overrides ego. As Shari began advocating for structural reform and corporate consolidation to strengthen shareholder value, friction intensified. To outside observers, these were governance debates over companies generating billions in annual revenue. Inside the family, they felt like betrayal. The rupture escalated when Sumner publicly minimized his daughter's contribution in a high-profile interview, implying she had added little to the empire's success. In high-net-worth families, public denouncement is more than emotional damage. It destabilizes perception among investors and board members who understand that control of voting shares can shift billions in market capitalization. When a patriarch worth $2.66 billion signals distrust toward his heir, the ripple effects travel quickly through executive ranks. What followed was not simply family disagreement, but legal confrontation. Boardroom alliances shifted, lawsuits emerged. Questions over mental competency and governance authority entered the courtroom. In empires of this scale, even whispers of instability can influence stock prices and corporate strategy. Control over Viacom and CBS meant control over content pipelines, political advertising revenue, and global licensing deals worth billions. Succession was no longer a family matter, it was a capital event. At its core, this conflict exposed a deeper vulnerability within billionaire ecosystems, the inability to separate personal authority from institutional survival. For Sumner, relinquishing control risked eroding the architecture he built over decades. For Shari, asserting independence meant challenging a system structured to concentrate power in one aging figure. When control becomes the ultimate currency, even bloodlines are subjected to negotiation. In the end, the empire survived. But the familial bond did not emerge intact. And in dynasties built on voting power and equity concentration, that fracture often leaves a quieter, more enduring mark than any quarterly earnings report. Jackie Chan, discipline without affection. He could leap across skyscrapers, survive explosions, and choreograph fight scenes that earned billions at the global box office. Yet the most delicate role in his life was the one he never rehearsed. By 2026, Jackie Chan had accumulated an estimated $400 million through decades of international films, endorsements, and production deals that spanned Hollywood and Asia. Studios trusted him with budgets worth tens of millions per project. Audiences trusted him with their admiration. But inside his own home, trust followed a far more complicated script. Jackie built his empire through discipline that bordered on obsession. He performed his own stunts, endured injuries that would sideline most actors, and reinvested earnings into production companies that expanded his influence across continents. The result was a financial machine generating hundreds of millions in cumulative revenue. That same philosophy shaped his parenting. His son, J.C. Chan, grew up under expectations forged by sacrifice and relentless standards. Praise was scarce, approval was conditional. In interviews, Jackie emphasized self-reliance, stating publicly that if his son was capable, he could earn his own money. If not, he would simply waste it. He also declared that his $400 million fortune would largely go to charity rather than automatically pass to his heir. In ultra-wealth households, such statements carry weight beyond rhetoric. Inheritance is more than future cash flow. It represents validation, security, and belonging. When a patriarch worth hundreds of millions signals detachment from generational transfer, the message resonates psychologically long before it is structured legally. JC entered adulthood carrying not only his father's surname, but the gravity of a global brand built through risk and perfectionism. Living beneath that shadow can distort identity. The fracture became public in 2014 when J.C. Chan was arrested on drug-related charges in Beijing and later served 6 months in prison. For a family associated with international fame and hundreds of millions in assets, the incident was more than scandal. It threatened reputation, capital carefully constructed over decades. Jackie issued formal apologies to the public, reinforcing personal accountability narratives, but the emotional distance between father and son reportedly deepened. Silence replaced instruction. What makes this story compelling is not the headline of $400 million, but the contrast between physical courage and emotional restraint. Jackie could choreograph chaos into cinematic beauty, yet vulnerability inside the family structure proved far less controllable. In many Asian billionaire and celebrity households, discipline is framed as preparation for resilience. But when resilience eclipses empathy, generational fracture can follow. The legacy of extreme success often assumes money can secure stability. Jackie's story suggests otherwise. Financial empires can be donated, diversified, or protected through trusts. Emotional inheritance, however, resists such engineering, and in families where the public persona towers over private intimacy, the quiet consequences may echo longer than any standing ovation. The hidden pattern: when wealth replaces warmth. The most dangerous illusion in extreme wealth is the belief that scale solves everything. When fortunes climb into the billions of dollars, control becomes effortless, access becomes instant, and influence stretches across continents. Yet across these dynasties, a quieter pattern emerges, one that no valuation can hedge against. The same mechanisms that build empires often erode intimacy. Power centralizes, authority hardens, and empathy becomes collateral damage. In ultra-high net worth families, wealth is rarely passive. It is structured through holding companies, trusts, voting shares, and succession clauses designed to protect assets worth $10 billion, $24 billion, or even hundreds of billions of dollars. These instruments are built for durability. They ensure that control over media conglomerates, technology platforms, entertainment empires, or global investment portfolios does not fragment across generations. But in protecting capital, they frequently transform inheritance into leverage. Access to billions becomes conditional, alignment becomes currency, dissent becomes disloyalty. This is where the fracture begins. When a parent controls an empire valued in the tens of billions, the relationship with a child can subtly shift from unconditional connection to performance evaluation. Loyalty to ideology, agreement with strategy, compliance with succession planning. In such environments, love is often implied but rarely expressed outside the framework of contribution. Emotional approval becomes entangled with corporate usefulness. And children raised inside these ecosystems quickly understand that inheritance worth billions of dollars may depend on obedience rather than authenticity. Several heirs in modern billionaire families have chosen distance over proximity to fortunes measured in the billions. That decision is rarely about rejecting money itself. It is about rejecting the architecture surrounding it. Because extreme wealth does not merely provide security, it also imposes scrutiny, expectation, and strategic alignment. When every disagreement risks influencing control over assets worth $20 billion or more, family dynamics become corporate governance issues. Another pattern surfaces in late-life regret. Some patriarchs eventually recognize that financial dominance does not automatically produce relational strength. By then, the empire may be secure, diversified across continents, protected by legal structures and valued in the billions. but emotional repair is not as easily negotiated as a board restructuring. Apologies cannot be retroactively compounded like equity. Perhaps the most sobering insight is this: money scales power exponentially, but it does not scale presence. A parent can engineer spacecraft, control global media narratives, command film industries generating hundreds of millions of dollars, or oversee conglomerates worth $2.66 billion and beyond. Yet the capacity to listen, affirm, and accept cannot be delegated to advisors or protected by trusts. Extreme wealth magnifies whatever already exists. If empathy is strong, resources can amplify it. If control dominates, billions of dollars simply extend its reach. That is the pattern. Few billionaires openly acknowledge the invisible cost embedded inside extraordinary success. What do you think is harder to manage, billions of dollars in global assets, or the fragile architecture of family trust? Across these dynasties, one pattern becomes disturbingly clear. Extreme wealth amplifies control, not connection. First, money in ultra-elite families often replaces emotional intimacy with performance metrics, loyalty, ideology, obedience. Second, inheritance becomes leverage. Billions of dollars are structured through trusts, voting shares, and conditional succession to reward alignment and punish dissent. Third, reputation management overtakes vulnerability. Protecting the empire frequently matters more than protecting the child. In many Asian and global billionaire circles, legacy is not simply financial, it is architectural. Control of assets ensures control of narrative, influence, and generational power. But when capital becomes the language of love, relationships fracture under its weight. If this perspective challenged how you see billionaire families, consider supporting the channel with a like and subscribe so we can continue exploring the unseen cost of extreme wealth. In Part 2, we'll uncover heirs who rebelled against their billionaire parents and what happened when they walked away from fortunes worth billions of dollars.